What if I informed you that the most exhilarating moment of my life that invigorated me in ways I had never experienced or envisioned was not with the individual I wed? Would you regard me with diminished esteem? Despise me, perhaps you would comprehend. Or perhaps not, regardless. You merit to receive the veracity. Here is my narrative. My name is Sarah on the surface. My life appears idyllic. Ideal. I am 36 years old and married. Mike has been a good and steady man for 12 years, diligent and reliable. We have constructed a peaceful existence in a tranquil suburban area vicinity adjacent to DeMichael in Colorado. We had 2 children and a golden retriever, a retriever called Max, and a residence with a white picket fence. Should you encounter me at the grocery store or PDA, you would likely believe I possess everything. However, the reality lies beneath the veneer. The surface of my marriage autopilot. For several years Mike and I ceased our activity. Being ourselves at some point during the journey became cohabitants who shared obligations yet not closeness. The ignition that previously ignited my heart's pounding has now diminished to a little embers lightly warm. I did not intend for this to occur. I never anticipated being that type of person. Woman who engages in extramarital relations. He has consistently demonstrated loyalty to Mike even amid challenging circumstances. 2024 transformed everything that year. Perhaps someone disrupted my predictability regulated environment that evoked emotions in May. Believed I would never experience emotions again. It was not the case. That was not intended to signify anything. Yet it did exceed my expectations. The year I made a significant transition. A boundary I can never reverse. And the year I uncovered my true identity for the better. It occurred on an unremarkable Tuesday in May. A day that I had effortlessly neglected was that I had transported the children to school. I was in it was sure a coffee prior to departing for work. The local coffee shop was more crowded than normal. And as I was in line while scrolling aimlessly via my mobile device, I sensed the gaze of another. It appears I have a lengthy queue today. Quite profound and comforting. A voice interrupted my thoughts. I observed him. He possessed streaked hair, with sufficient gray to impart that his smile had a distinguished charm. He was both confident and disarming, attired informally in a button-down shirt, veracity denim trousers. However, there existed an element, Sarah, that distinguished him. I responded courteously. This location consistently evokes a smile, congested precisely when one is in haste. Chuckled. And we engaged in further exchanges. Initially, the words were merely superficial conversation. There was something in the manner he gazed at. I felt as though I were the sole individual present. The room had not been occupied for years. Gazed at me in that manner. Before I realized it, we were positioned at the counter placing our order. He introduced himself as our drinks Jason, a marketing consultant who relocated to the area. I informed him of my status. I am an office manager. And for some reason, he referred to my spouse and children as though I were required to remind both him and myself of the demarcations that existed between us. It is a pleasure to meet you, Sarah, he remarked, his gaze fixed upon her, dwelling on mine for quite a moment beyond the appropriate duration. Perhaps I will say farewell. Approximately. I nodded, experiencing a strange sensation, palpitations in my chest as I seized my exit from the door with coffee. It should have concluded their transitory encounter with an unfamiliar indie Jason. I did not see him again until the following week at the same coffee establishment. He gestured with a wave. He beckoned me to his table. And I hesitated for a while at that moment. I seated myself and addressed my thoughts. We conversed for about an hour without any adverse effects, reminiscing and exchanging anecdotes of our past. He made me feel acknowledged, as if I truly existed, more than only a spouse and parent. I established our routine every Tuesday morning. We convene in the coffee shop for 1 hour. I see myself as another iteration of I am, a lighter version of myself, more unrestricted, alive at that moment. I was unaware that those discussions at the coffee shop were an uncontrollable phenomenon, even if I had the desire. Had someone informed me months prior that I would be expressing my innermost thoughts regarding what transpired that night would have elicited laughter from me. Incredulity. While denial is futile. That night was both the most exceptional and the most detrimental, the most significant night dialogue's time I shall never forget. I cannot forget. Regardless of my desires. It could have commenced like any other Tuesday. I delivered the children to school, completing my errands and proceeding to the coffee shop for a meeting with Jason had become habitual. We did not schedule it. At least that is what I reassured myself. Although we both were aware that we would encounter one another, it was our living room that morning. And Jason examined the agreement. He appeared more preoccupied. Anxious. Which was highly atypical for the I had become acquainted with a confident man. I inquired while stirring my cappuccino. And Jason, the spouse and maternal figure, looked at me. Significant thoughts occupy my head. For the first time he discussed his life in a manner he had not previously, prior to recounting his relocation to the tumultuous divorce. He lamented the absence of his children residing with their mother and the profound solitude experienced throughout the transition. His vulnerability surprised me. I had considered Jason until that point as somebody who possessed complete control. An individual who existed devoid of the complexities and obligations that encumbered. He let me down and then remarked something I did not anticipate. I am uncertain about my actions due without these discussions. Sarah. You create this alleviating solitude. I was uncertain how to reply to his statements. Lingered in the atmosphere between us. Weighty and undeniably. My heart raced. The initial moment I comprehended the extent of the peril this was evolving. Although rather than exerting force, it was absent. I confided in Jason later that week on massage me despite our lack of prior number exchanges previously. But he must have researched me in the work directory. I had provided to him my business card once informally during one of our conversations. The text was uncomplicated. Jason, would you be interested in having dinner together at any point? To the cafe. I gazed at the message that seemed to last for hours. I was aware of what it signified and its potential consequences. A portion of me desired to eradicate it permanently. Reflect upon an alternate aspect. A more amplified. The restless portion urged me to acquiesce. And I complied. On that Friday night, I informed Mike. I attended a business function. It was not the inaugural one. Stim. I had deceived him. Yet this deception seemed larger. More authentic. Jason collected me from a little parking area. Approximately 1 mile from my residence. I was reluctant. This presence in proximity to my residence is unwelcome. I risked all when I entered his automobile. An unusual mix of exhilaration. And we drove to a secluded restaurant. The periphery of the town. A particular type of location. At a place where we would remain unrecognized. The dialogue progressed seamlessly as it consistently did, however. There existed an implicit conflict between us. A magnetic attraction that neither of us verbalized. Following dinner, Jason proposed that we go for a proceed to the designated parking area. I am aware, he stated, the voice is low and steady, it is silent. And the extraordinary sights I ought to have declined. No. I should have terminated it at that point, however. I nodded. The location he brought me to was a tiny clearing with a view of the city. The illuminations shimmered in the distance. And the air was brisk and chilly, on the occasion. We sat in the vehicle, discussing many topics for a period of time. The discussion ceased abruptly. Jason turned to me in stillness. His eyes, he softly stated, searching for mine. Sarah. I do not wish to jeopardize our relationship, yet. I can no longer feign indifference to my breath was stuck in my throat due to my anticipation. His verbalization rendered it tangible. I share the sentiment. I acknowledged that my voice was scarcely audible. He then kissed me. His voice barely audible. It was unlike the kisses I had exchanged with Mike's expedited regimen over the years. This kiss was distinct. It was replete with ardent yearning and a form of desperation I had not experienced in years. It was the type of kiss that evokes profound emotion. Disregard all other matters. Even the lines. You are on the verge of crossing, we did not halt. That evening in Jason's vehicle all circumstances transformed. We'll not assume it was a fantastical fairy tale. Although it was not a moment. It was authentically raw and intense for the first time in years. I experienced a sense of want and necessity. Ollie Jason to reclaim my identity as a woman. Not merely as a spouse. As a mother. She made me feel acknowledged in a manner that Mike had not experienced in years. At that moment, I was indifferent to the subsequent repercussions as we remained seated in the silence of the automobile. Reality began to permeate. I gazed at the city lights. My heart still resonating. I pondered what it had recently completed. I apologize. Jason stated, shattering the stillness. I did not intend to interrupt. Do not apologize. I desired this as well. But as I mentioned, the feelings of remorse began to infiltrate my thoughts. Concerning Mike. Our children. The faith I had constructed and the commitments I had undertaken nonetheless. A portion of me harbored no regrets. In not wholly. Jason extended his hand towards mine. His touch is warm and reassuring, yours is not. Must experience remorse. Sarah. You merit. I felt elated, I wished to trust him. He desired to believe that a single night might be warranted. That it did not render me a despicable individual, however. I was aware that I was transgressing a boundary I could never uncross. And nothing shall ever exist identical to my drive home that evening. The mind was a tumult of intense emotions replayed each moment in my mind. Attempting to comprehend the events that transpired when I entered through the door. Mike was asleep on the couch with the television still on. Remained stationary for a moment observing him. He experienced a pang of remorse so acute it caused my chest discomfort. Although I also experienced an unfamiliar sensation. For years, I experienced a sense of fatality, which frightened me and above all else. They asserted confidential information. Knowing a method for elucidating all matters except mine did not, I had everything managed. And control. Or so I asserted. To myself. Following that evening with Jason. It felt as though I had received a renewed existence. The fervor. The bond. Fire was my sole preoccupation, however. I was cautious that my secret remained just mine. Loy was not prepared to allow it to escape. Mike. Me, he had no reason to suspect anything. Life has descended into a monotonous routine such that my sporadic absences scarcely elicited a response. He appeared relieved. If anything. Even when I informed him I had acquired several novel pastimes. Professional sessions. And a fraudulent book club. I developed the alibi. I adhered to the impeccable alibi. The mornings following my evenings with Jason were the most challenging aspect was returning home. That how the recollection of his touch remains vivid on my skin and revert to my function as a wife and not. I greeted Mike with a morning kiss and packed. I prepared the children's lunches and proceeded with my day. Thus, though nothing had altered externally, yet internally all circumstances had transformed. Jason and I discovered methods to appropriate time together during an extended lunch. Pausing here for a late-night drive there. Resided in the same location on 2 occasions, always vigilant to evade detection. He comprehended the stakes as thoroughly as I did. He inquired if I ever experienced guilt. Evening. While we lie entwined in one another. The embrace of another in a tranquil hotel. The day I confessed to gazing at the ceiling. Is it insufficient to halt? Jason acquiesced. Hand drawing languid circles across my shoulder. I do not wish to remain a secret. Sarah. But I understand that this is all we possess at present, at least his comments resonated in the atmosphere, however. We both understood the futility of ruminating on what could not be. We resided in the present. Seen the stolen moments that were excessively pleasurable are hard to relinquish, despite the hazards. I maintained my existence with Jason, which is distinct from my own life. Lee compartmentalized everything, with Mike establishing an imperceptible boundary between the two versions of me. Was Sartre's spouse, the mother, the reliable woman Amal depended on. And suddenly there was Sarah, the paramour. The woman who experienced being liberated in Jason's embrace was not effortless. However, I successfully accomplished it. Mike did not inquire on myself when I stated I would be working late or convening with pals. He overlooked upon returning home adorned with perfume. I had not exited the residence when my hair appeared excessively flawless following a task. I was consistently cautious, and he never provided a rationale for me to trust him. If he suspected anything that summer, Jason and I embarked on a day excursion to the Highlands. Constituted a unique opportunity for increased engagement. For more than a couple of hours without concern about being discovered. We located and isolated a location on a lake, distant from scrutiny. The sun warmed my skin. Water cooled against my toes as we rested. Our legs dangled over the edge of the dock over the edges. Jason extended his hand towards mine. Hand for an instant. All else diminished. I desire for us to remain in this state. He softly uttered, forever, while caressing with his thumb. I muttered, me too, as our bodies brushed against each other. My voice was scarcely audible that day. Reminiscent of a dream when we laughed, conversed, and embraced one another. It was flawless in every aspect. When we embraced beneath the open sky, it seemed as though time had ceased to progress. PP spinning is exclusively for us. Although dreams do not endure indefinitely. Despite my desire to retain regarding that sensation, I was aware it was unattainable. The reality of my life ultimately manifested hastily, returning immediately after departing from Jason's. Despite this, I managed to seize those instances with him that were mine. Flee my refuge. And as the year progressed, I increasingly clung to them. Questioned whether Mike observed the extent of more content. I noticed the extent to which my burden had diminished, or his demeanor suggested that he believed I had finally arrived at a conclusion. Also seeking satisfaction in my pastimes or in the recent initiatives I have undertaken at work, regardless of the rationale. He never inquired. Consequently, I continued to lead a dual existence. I am perpetually teetering on the precipice of a blade, allowing my two worlds to converge now as I remain seated here in 2025. I am contemplating all occurrences from the previous year, that moment on the water with Jason. The exquisite intimate moment continues to resonate. In my opinion, it was unequivocally the finest by the time of 2024. As I contemplate the future, I cannot help but ponder what the forthcoming year will bring. The most significant moment of 2025 arises from my husband. I wish to believe it could be possible. I desire to believe that Mike and I could re-establish our connection with one another. The spark we lost could yet be rekindled. However, internally, I am uncertain if that is the case. It feasible because to the experience of having experienced an entity that is beneficial and produces positive outcomes, how do you return to a state of feeling so alive, the previous state of affairs? For